The Mediterranean storm hit without warning, the kind sailors whispered about in taverns. Walls of black water rising like the wrath of God himself, winds that could shred oak like parchment. Lady Isla Corvina clung to a piece of her ship's hull as the galley broke apart around her, the screams of drowning servants swallowed by thunder, and she thought, with strange clarity, that death would come cold and dark and alone. She was wrong about the alone part. When she woke on an unfamiliar beach at dusk, coughing seawater and pain, the last rays of October sun painting the sky blood red, she saw a castle in the distance, Byzantine and ancient, silhouetted against the dying light. She didn't know then that the castle's sole inhabitant had been waiting in self-imposed exile for 200 years, that he would smell her blood before he saw her, that every instinct in his undead body would scream at him to feed. She didn't know that Lord Sebastian de Montemar, once a Templar knight turned vampire in 1206, had fled to this unmapped island after losing control and slaughtering 200 innocent souls, that he survived on animal blood as penance, that he made ships avoid these waters through supernatural compulsion because he believed himself too dangerous to exist near humanity. She only knew she was injured, alone, and that shelter meant survival. So she limped toward the castle, leaving bloody footprints in the sand, while inside those ancient walls, a vampire who hadn't seen another human being in 2 centuries fought the most desperate battle of his immortal life, the battle not to kill her. Sebastian smelled the blood before moonrise, the scent hitting him like a physical blow after 200 years of starvation rations. Fresh human blood, copper sweet and intoxicating, somewhere in his castle. Every muscle in his body went rigid, fangs extending involuntarily, eyes shifting to crimson before he could stop them. The hunger rose like a tidal wave, 2 centuries of deprivation suddenly screaming for satisfaction. She was unconscious. He'd find her easily. She'd never even know. Just one taste. Just enough to take the edge off this maddening thirst. He'd earned it, hadn't he? 200 years of punishment. Surely he'd earned just one small mercy. He forced himself to breathe, though he didn't need air, the meditation technique from his human life barely holding against the monster inside. He found her in his great hall, collapsed on stones he'd walked alone for 2 centuries, her dark hair matted with salt and blood, her traveling dress torn and soaked, one leg bleeding from a deep gash. She was perhaps 24, beautiful even covered in bruises and sand, her face delicate and fine-boned, clearly nobility by the quality of her ruined clothing. The wound on her leg pulsed with her heartbeat, fresh blood pooling on his floor, and Sebastian felt his control fracturing. His hands trembled, his throat burned. Every instinct shouted, take, drink, feed, and he wanted to. God help him. He wanted to so badly it felt like dying. But he'd been a knight once, before he'd been a monster. He'd sworn oaths to protect the innocent. This woman was innocent, shipwrecked and dying, and he could help her. Or he could prove that his 200 years of exile had taught him nothing. Sebastian closed his crimson eyes, forced them back to brown, retracted his fangs through sheer will, and made his choice. He would not be the monster today. Carrying her to the guest chamber was torture. She was warm, alive, her heartbeat a drum against his chest, her blood scent surrounding him in a cloud of temptation. He laid her on a bed that hadn't been used in decades, his hands shaking with the effort of not biting. He lit a fire, found old linens preserved by the dry Mediterranean climate, and then faced the hardest task, treating her wounds. The leg gash needed cleaning and bandaging. He would have to touch her bleeding flesh. He would have to be close to that intoxicating scent while his hands were covered in her blood. Sebastian prepared himself as if going to war, reciting prayers in Latin, breathing exercises from his Templar training, every meditation technique he'd learned in 250 years of existence. Then, with trembling hands, he cleaned the wound, his vampire healing senses telling him it wasn't deep enough for permanent damage. just painful and prone to infection. He worked quickly, efficiently, wrapping clean linen around her calf while his fangs pressed against his lips, demanding to be released, demanding he taste, just once. When he finished, he stood so fast he knocked over the water basin, backing away from her like she was flame and he was dry kindling. He made it to the hallway before his control shattered, slamming his fist into the stone wall hard enough to crack it, forehead pressed against cold rock as he shook with denied hunger. He stayed there for an hour, maybe two, time meaningless when you were immortal and suffering, until he was sure he could walk away. Then he fled to his library and didn't come out until dawn. Isla woke to confusion and pain. She was in a bedchamber, Byzantine architecture around her, a fire crackling in a hearth, her leg bandaged with surprising skill. The last thing she remembered was drowning, clinging to wreckage, the storm swallowing her world. How was she here? Who had saved her? She tried to sit up, and her ribs screamed in protest. Definitely cracked. Everything hurt. There was water beside the bed, and dried fruit on a plate, and she drank greedily, her throat raw from seawater. The room was clean but dusty, as if someone had hastily prepared it after long abandonment. When she could stand, she limped to the door, using the bed frame for support. The castle beyond was vast and empty, hallways stretching in both directions, everything covered in the fine dust of decades. She called out, her voice echoing off stone. No answer. She explored what she could reach with her injured leg, finding the great hall where someone had cleaned up what looked like bloodstains. Finding a library filled wall to wall with books in languages she recognized, and some she didn't. Finding a kitchen with supplies that looked ancient but somehow preserved. But no people, no servants, no guards. Nothing alive except her. As the sun set and shadows lengthened, Isla began to fear she was truly alone, that whoever saved her had left, that she was trapped in an abandoned castle on an unknown island with no way home. Then she heard footsteps. The man who appeared in the library doorway was tall and severe, dark-haired and pale, handsome in the way of old religious paintings, beautiful but austere, as if joy had been carved away, leaving only dignified bones. He wore clothing that looked centuries out of date, Spanish style from long ago, perfectly preserved but wrong for 1456. He stopped when he saw her, keeping careful distance, his brown eyes wary. There was something unsettling about his stillness, the way he didn't quite breathe, the careful control in every movement. Isla's instincts whispered danger, but he'd saved her life, so she swallowed her fear. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "I am Sebastian," he said, his voice deep and careful, Spanish accented, each word precisely chosen. "This is my home. You were shipwrecked. I found you on the beach and treated your wounds." "Are you alone here?" "Yes." The word was flat, final. "How long have you been alone?" A pause, something flickering across his severe face. "A very long time." Isla studied him, cataloging the strangeness. The old clothing, the pallor of someone who never saw sun. The way he stood too still, like a statue between movements. The distance he maintained, as if afraid to come closer. "Thank you for helping me," she said carefully. "I'm Lady Isla Corvina of Venice. I was traveling to Constantinople to be married when the storm hit. I need to send word to my family or find passage to continue my journey. Is there a port on this island?" Sebastian's face might have been carved from marble for all the emotion it showed. "This island is uninhabited except for me. There is no port, no village, no other people." "Then how do I leave? Surely ships pass by. We could signal them." "Ships don't come here." His voice was harder now, something dark beneath the careful control. This island isn't on any maps. Sailors avoid these waters. Cold fear trickled down Isla's spine. Why would they avoid it? Because I make them. The admission hung between them like smoke. Sebastian's jaw tightened as if he regretted speaking. You're trapped here, Lady Isla. I'm sorry. I didn't cause your shipwreck, but I can't help you leave either. This island is my prison, and now, I'm afraid, it's yours as well. Days passed in strange domestic routine. Sebastian appeared only after sunset, never during daylight hours. He provided everything Isla needed. Fresh fish he caught at night, fruit from wild trees on the island, water from an ancient well, firewood, blankets, even books from his vast library. But he never ate with her, never came close when her wounds needed tending, never entered her chamber without explicit permission called through the door. He was courteous, helpful, and utterly remote, as if afraid of his own proximity. Isla, trapped and healing, explored during daylight. The island was small, rocky, beautiful in its desolation. Wild goats roamed the hills, and she noticed they looked strangely pale and weak, though they seemed to breed well enough that their population remained stable despite their sickly appearance. Seabirds nested in the cliffs. The castle was the only human structure. Everything else was wind and stone and sea. At night, unable to sleep, she sought Sebastian's company in his library. He was always there after dark, reading by lamplight, and he never refused her presence. They talked about philosophy, about history, about the books he'd collected. He spoke Latin, Greek, Arabic, Spanish, Italian, and a dozen other languages. He'd read everything, knew history with unsettling accuracy, described the Third Crusade as if he'd witnessed it firsthand. You speak as if you were there, Isla said one night, watching him across the chessboard he'd been teaching her to use. Sebastian's hand froze on his knight. I read extensively about it. No one reads that extensively. You described the fall of Acre like you felt the heat of the fires. I have a good imagination. Sebastian, she leaned forward. How old are you really? Old enough to know better than to answer that question. It might have been a joke. His severe face didn't quite smile, but something almost warm flickered in his eyes before he shuddered it away. Your move, Lady Isla. You're about to lose your queen if you're not careful. She noticed other oddities as days became weeks. He never ate or drank in front of her, deflecting with excuses. He'd already eaten. He'd eat later. He wasn't hungry. He disappeared entirely during daylight, and she'd searched the castle thoroughly enough to know he wasn't just avoiding her, he was completely absent, as if he ceased to exist between dawn and dusk. There were no mirrors anywhere in the castle, though there were marks on walls where they'd once hung. When she accidentally cut her finger on a broken plate one morning, calling out for help, Sebastian had appeared in the doorway, taken one look at her bleeding hand, and fled. He didn't return for 2 days. The goats on the island remained pale and weak, despite her attempts to feed them better, and she found one dead near the well, its body unmarked but looking somehow deflated, as if something vital had been drained from it. Isla wasn't stupid. She'd heard stories, fairy tales, warnings whispered by nurses and priests. Creatures that walked only at night, creatures that drank blood to survive. Creatures that were beautiful and terrible and damned. She told herself she was being ridiculous. Those were stories for children. But the evidence mounted until she couldn't ignore it anymore. One night, gathering courage like armor, she asked directly, Sebastian, what are you? He went very still, that unnatural stillness she'd noticed from the first night. A man who made terrible mistakes and is paying for them. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give without frightening you. I'm already frightened. I'm trapped on an island with a strange man who hasn't aged in 200 years, who never eats, who flees from the sight of my blood. Tell me the truth." Sebastian closed the book he'd been reading, setting it down with careful precision. His hands were shaking. "You should be frightened. You should stay as far from me as possible at all times." "Why?" "Because I'm dangerous, Isla. More dangerous than you can possibly imagine." "You've been nothing but kind to me." "I'm dangerous!" His voice cracked like thunder, and for just a moment his eyes flashed crimson in the lamplight, inhuman and terrifying, predator red, and Isla gasped, stumbling backward. Sebastian closed his eyes immediately, breathing hard though he didn't need air, and when he opened them again they were normal brown, human-looking, but his face was anguished. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I should go. I should stay away from you entirely. This was a mistake." "No, wait." Isla forced herself to speak through her fear. "Sebastian, please, don't leave. I'm alone here. You're the only person I can talk to. I need—" Her voice broke. "I need to not be alone. Please." He stopped in the doorway, his back to her, shoulders rigid with tension. "You should want me to leave, Isla. You should be grateful every moment I'm not in your presence." "But I'm not. Please, just talk to me. Tell me about the books you've read. Tell me about this island. Tell me anything. Just don't leave me alone in the dark." Sebastian stood frozen for a long moment, and Isla saw the war happening inside him, the trembling in his hands, the way he gripped the door frame as if it was the only thing keeping him from either fleeing or attacking. Then, slowly, he turned back to her. His eyes were brown again, carefully controlled, but there was such loneliness in them that Isla's heart ached. "Very well," he said quietly. "I'll stay. But Isla, please understand. You're showing kindness to a monster who doesn't deserve it. Let me be the judge of that." She sat back down, trying to calm her racing heart. "Now, you were going to explain why you think Aristotle's ethics are superior to Plato's idealism." Something that might have been a smile touched Sebastian's severe mouth. "I said nothing of the sort. I said they address different questions entirely." And they talked through the night. Two lonely people in an ancient castle, separated by everything except their desperate need for companionship. Sebastian was falling in love, and he knew it was the worst thing he could possibly do. Every night Isla sought his company, and every night he failed to refuse her, and every night he fell deeper into the beautiful, terrible trap of caring. She was brilliant, her mind sharp and curious, educated far beyond what was common for women because her merchant father had valued learning. She debated philosophy with him as an equal, challenged his arguments, made him think in ways he hadn't in centuries. She was learning chess with frightening speed, beating him occasionally now, her face lighting up with competitive joy when she did. She sang Venetian folk songs, church hymns, melodies that made his undead heart ache with remembered humanity. She was kind in small, devastating ways. She'd noticed the goats were weak and had started feeding them extra vegetation she gathered, trying to nurse them back to health, not knowing he was the reason they were drained, though he was always careful to feed lightly from each animal, never killing them, allowing them to recover and breed so the population sustained itself. She worried about her family thinking her dead, grieved her lost servants, mourned the future she'd never have. And she was lonely, desperately lonely despite their conversations, trapped on an island with only a monster for company. One night, Sebastian found her on the ramparts, staring at the sea, tears on her face that she tried to hide. "Isla?" He approached carefully, as always, keeping distance. "I'm sorry, I'm fine." She wiped her eyes quickly. "You're not fine. My family thinks I'm dead. Everyone I traveled with drowned. I was supposed to marry, supposed to have a future, children, a life. Instead, I'm trapped here with no way home, no way to even send word I survived. They'll mourn me. They'll think I died in terror, and I can't tell them otherwise. I'm sorry. The words were desperately inadequate. If I could send you home, I would. Would you? She turned to look at him, moonlight painting her face silver. Or do you want me to stay? Sebastian's breath caught. That's not a fair question. Answer it anyway. Isla, you're lonely, aren't you? That's why you're here on this island, completely alone. You're punishing yourself with isolation. But you don't want to be alone. Not really. That's why you talk to me every night. Why you taught me chess. Why you haven't just avoided me entirely. Sebastian closed his eyes, everything inside him screaming to lie, to protect her from the truth. But he'd spent 200 years lying to himself, and he was so tired. Yes, you're right. I've been alone for 200 years, and I don't want to be alone anymore. You've brought life back to this dead place. You sing, and you laugh, and you argue with me about philosophy, and you make me remember what it was like to be human. I don't want you to leave, but that doesn't mean I have the right to keep you. What if I want to? Stay? You don't know what you're saying. Stop telling me what I know. I'm not a child, Sebastian. I understand you're dangerous. I saw your eyes change. I know what you are, or at least I can guess. You're the creature from the stories, aren't you? The ones that drink blood and walk only at night? You're a vampire. The word hung between them like a blade. Sebastian's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Yes. And you've been alone here for 200 years. Yes. Because you're afraid you'll hurt someone. Because I know I will. I did. I killed 200 innocent people, Isla. An entire village. Men, women, children. I lost control, and I slaughtered them all like animals. That's why I'm here. That's why I can never leave. That's why you need to understand that I'm not safe. I'm not good. I'm a monster who doesn't deserve companionship or happiness or anything except this endless punishment. Isla stared at him, processing. You killed 200 people. Yes. The word came out broken. 200 years ago. And you've been here ever since, alone, punishing yourself. Yes. But you haven't hurt me. Not yet. Sebastian, you've had dozens of opportunities. I've been bleeding and unconscious and alone with you for weeks. When I cut my finger, you ran away rather than risk hurting me. If you wanted to kill me, you would have done it that first night. You don't understand the temptation. You have no idea how badly I wanted to, how badly I still want to every single moment you're near me. Your blood sings to me, Isla. It's maddening. I'm starving myself on animal blood because I don't trust myself with humans, but it's barely enough to survive. And you're right here, warm and alive and bleeding, and every instinct I have screams at me to drink. But you don't. Not yet, he repeated harshly. Then explain it to me. Tell me the truth. All of it. No more hiding. So Sebastian told her everything. How he'd been turned in 1206 during the Third Crusade, a Templar knight wounded in battle, turned by an ancient vampire who saw potential in his warrior skills. How he'd served as a vampire knight for 50 years, protecting vampire territories, enforcing their laws, hunting rogues who exposed their kind. How he'd been controlled, disciplined, feeding carefully from criminals and the dying, believing himself one of the good vampires. How he'd been sent to suppress a peasant rebellion in 1256, ordered to execute 5 ringleaders who'd accidentally killed a young vampire. How something had gone wrong, the full moon affecting his bloodlust, weeks without feeding, the scent of 200 terrified humans packed into the village square. How he'd lost control completely. How when he came back to himself, everyone was dead. The village square soaked in blood, children's bodies among the corpses, and he'd become exactly the monster he'd feared. How he'd fled his vampire master, rejected vampire society entirely, found this unmapped island, and exiled himself here. How for 200 years he'd survived on animal blood that barely sustained him, slowly starving as punishment. How he'd been steering ships away using supernatural compulsion, creating an aura of dread that made sailors avoid these waters without knowing why. "So no ship will ever come," Isla said slowly. "No, I maintain the compulsion constantly. It's second nature now." "And you've been planning what exactly? To keep me here forever?" "No! I've been trying to figure out how to let you go without breaking my exile. But I can't. If I let a ship come, I'd have to interact with the crew. More humans, more temptation. I can barely control myself around you alone. The only way to keep you safe, to keep everyone safe, is to maintain my isolation." "So I'm trapped." "Yes." Sebastian's voice was raw with guilt. "I'm so sorry, Isla. I'm so desperately sorry." Isla should have been furious, should have screamed, cursed, hated him. Instead, she asked quietly, "Do you want me to stay?" "That's not a fair question." "Answer it anyway." Sebastian looked at her fully, letting her see everything. The loneliness, the longing, the desperate hunger both for blood and for companionship. "Yes. God help me, yes. You're the first person I've spoken to in 200 years. Every night I tell myself to stay away, and every night I fail because talking to you is the only thing that makes me feel alive. I don't want you to leave. But wanting something doesn't mean I have the right to take it. You deserve better than a monster's selfish need for company." "What if I want to stay?" "You can't possibly. Stop telling me what I can and can't want. Listen to me, Sebastian. I understand what you are. I understand you killed people. I understand you're dangerous. But I also understand that you've fought your nature every single day for 200 years. You're living on animal blood that barely sustains you because you won't risk human life. You've exiled yourself to complete isolation as penance. You ran away from my bleeding finger rather than risk losing control. That's not a monster. That's a man trying desperately, painfully, to be good." "I killed children, Isla. Innocent children. That blood doesn't wash off." "No, it doesn't. You'll carry that guilt forever. But you've spent 2 centuries trying to atone. Doesn't that count for something? Doesn't the fact that you hate what you did, that you've punished yourself more harshly than any court could, that you've chosen isolation and starvation over risking it happening again, doesn't that matter?" Sebastian had no answer. He'd spent 200 years convinced of his own damnation, and here was this mortal woman arguing for his redemption with tears in her eyes. "I don't know," he whispered. "I don't know what I am anymore. Monster or man or something between." "Then let me decide." Isla stepped closer, close enough that Sebastian stopped breathing entirely. "Stop steering ships away from the island." "I can't." "Yes, you can. Not to trap me, to give me a choice. Let ships pass normally. If one comes close enough to signal, I'll decide then, leave or stay. But it has to be my choice, freely made, not because I'm trapped." "And if you choose to leave?" The question hurt to ask. "Then you let me go. No supernatural compulsion, no interference. You let me signal the ship and sail away." "And if you stay?" His voice was barely audible. Isla looked up at him, this severe, beautiful monster who'd saved her life and argued philosophy with her and was starving himself rather than hurt her. "Then I stay because I want to." Because I choose you and this strange life over the one I was supposed to have. Because for the first time in my life, I'm valued for my mind instead of my dowry and marriage prospects. Because I'd rather debate Aristotle with a vampire in an ancient castle than be shipped off to a stranger for political alliance. This is madness. Probably, but isn't it my madness to embrace? Sebastian closed his eyes, and something that might have been hope flickered across his face before fear crushed it. Very well, I'll stop the compulsion. But Isla, understand, if you choose to leave, I won't try to stop you. I swear it on whatever remains of my soul. I know. That's why I trust you. And she did, impossibly, trust this vampire who could kill her in seconds, but who fought himself bloody to keep her safe. Sebastian stopped steering ships away the next night, releasing the supernatural compulsion he'd maintained for 2 centuries. It felt like removing armor he'd worn so long it had fused to his skin. The island became visible again, findable, just another speck in the Mediterranean, instead of a blank space ships avoided without knowing why. Then they waited. Days passed, then weeks, then months. The autumn storms gave way to winter's clearer skies, better sailing weather. Isla's injuries healed completely. She grew stronger, able to explore the entire island, and she made it truly habitable, planting a garden of herbs, establishing fishing routines, organizing the castle's abandoned rooms. And every night, she and Sebastian talked. He taught her Greek philosophy, Arabic poetry, sword-fighting techniques from his Templar training, the history of vampire society he'd fled. She taught him Venetian merchant customs, how to laugh again, that perhaps he might deserve a small measure of happiness despite his past. They never spoke about what would happen when a ship finally came. The unspoken question hung between them like morning mist, present but unacknowledged. Sebastian found himself hoping, terrified, that she might stay. But he forced himself not to influence her, not to make her feel obligated. If she stayed, it had to be completely her choice. Isla found herself dreading the sight of sails on the horizon, which should have terrified her but instead felt right. The life she'd been heading toward. An arranged marriage, being a political pawn, valued only for connections and dowry, felt increasingly hollow compared to late-night chess games and passionate debates about whether free will existed. 5 months after Sebastian released the compulsion, during the calm winter sailing season when merchant vessels traveled more frequently through these waters, a ship passed near enough to the island that Isla could have signaled it. She was on the beach gathering shells when she saw it, close enough that a torch would catch their attention, close enough that screaming might carry on the wind. She could wave her arms, light a fire, do something to catch their notice. The ship would investigate, rescue her, take her back to civilization, back to Venice, to her family, to the marriage contract that had probably been dissolved when she was declared dead, but could be reinstated. Back to being Lady Isla Corvina, valuable trading piece, expected to be ornamental and obedient. Or she could let the ship pass, stay on this island with a vampire who argued with her as an equal, who valued her thoughts, who looked at her like she was the sun and he'd been living in darkness for centuries. Stay in this strange life where she'd read more and learned more and felt more alive than she ever had in Venice's gilded cages. Sebastian was in the castle, forcing himself not to watch, not to interfere. This was her choice. She'd demanded that freedom and he'd given it, and now he had to trust her with it, even though the waiting was agony. He'd lived 250 years, but these moments felt longer than all of them combined. Isla stood on the beach, torch in hand, watching the ship pass. It would be so easy. Just wave. Just call out. Return to normalcy, to safety, to a human life. The ship sailed on, disappearing beyond the horizon. Isla lowered the torch. She returned to the castle and found Sebastian in the library, exactly where she'd known he'd be, staring at a book he clearly wasn't reading. "There was a ship," she said. He looked up, his face carefully blank, but his hands white-knuckled on the book's cover. "I know." "I didn't signal it." The book fell from his hands. "Why not?" "Because I choose this. I choose you. I choose late-night conversations about Aristotle and teaching you Venetian folk songs and arguing about whether Dante's Inferno is theologically sound. I choose a life where I'm valued for my mind, not my marriage prospects. I choose you, Sebastian. I choose this island. I choose us." Sebastian crossed the room so fast it was barely movement, pulling her into an embrace that was desperate and reverent and shaking. His face buried in her hair, breathing her in even though he didn't need air, just needing to hold her, to believe she was real and choosing to stay. "You'll age," he said against her hair, voice rough. "In 20 years you'll be 44, and I'll still look 29. In 40 years you'll be 64, and I'll be unchanged. You'll grow old and I'll watch, and eventually you'll die and I'll remain. Are you sure you want that?" "I know. You're giving up everything. Your family, your homeland, your future. I'm choosing my own path for the first time in my life. Isn't that worth something?" Sebastian pulled back just enough to look at her, his brown eyes intense, searching her face for doubt. Finding none, he kissed her. It was careful at first, afraid of his own strength and hunger, but Isla's hands tangled in his hair and pulled him closer, and he let himself fall into it. 200 years of loneliness cracking open, warmth flooding in. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, or at least Isla was breathing hard, Sebastian was just mimicking from habit, Isla said, "I have one condition. Anything." She could ask him to walk into sunlight and he'd do it. "Eventually, not now, but someday, I want you to turn me." Sebastian went rigid. "Isla, no." "I've thought about it. If I stay human, I'll age and die while you remain. I don't want that. I don't want to leave you alone again. So someday, when I've lived enough of my human life, when I'm ready, I want to become like you. I want forever with you." You'd be giving up sunlight, food, warmth, the experience of being alive. I'd be gaining eternity with someone who loves me for who I am, not what I represent. That's worth more than sunlight. You don't know what you're asking. The hunger is maddening. The guilt of what you have to do to survive. The isolation from humanity. I'll have you. We'll face it together. You survived 200 years alone. I'll have you beside me. That makes all the difference. Sebastian looked at her, this brave mortal woman who'd chosen a monster, and felt something he hadn't felt in 2 centuries. Hope. "If you're certain, truly certain, I'll do it. But not now. Not for years. You should live your human life first. Experience everything you can. And if you change your mind, I won't. But if you do, I won't hold you to it. The choice remains yours, always." Isla smiled, the expression warm and certain. "Then we have time. Years to learn each other. Years for you to teach me everything about your world. Years before I have to worry about growing old. Let's not waste them." Years passed on their island, time marked by seasons changing and Isla's slow, beautiful aging. They built a life together from nothing. Isla transformed the castle from a tomb into a home, clearing overgrowth, repairing rooms, planting gardens that bloomed in Mediterranean sun. Sebastian taught her languages, philosophy, sword fighting. The careful control he'd learned to maintain his humanity despite his hunger. Isla taught him to laugh again, really laugh. His severe face transforming into something joyful when she told Venetian merchant stories or beat him at chess through increasingly clever strategies. They married in a private ceremony under the stars. No priest, just vows spoken to each other with the sea as witness. Sebastian promised to love her all her mortal days and beyond. Isla promised to choose him every day, as deliberately as she'd chosen to stay. They made love carefully, Sebastian terrified of his own strength, but Isla was fearless. And gradually he learned to trust himself with her, learned that tenderness and hunger could coexist, that he could hold her and kiss her and worship her body without becoming a monster. The first time Isla noticed gray in her hair, she was 30. Sebastian still looked 29. She touched the silver strands in the mirror and felt strange. Not sad exactly, but aware of time's passage in a way she hadn't been. Sebastian kissed her temple. Still beautiful. Still lying to make me feel better? Never lying. You'll be beautiful at 90. By 35, the age difference was visible. Isla had fine lines around her eyes, the first softness in her jawline. Sebastian remained frozen in time, eternally young, eternally severe, except when she made him smile. She didn't mind. She'd made her choice with eyes open. By 40, she was undeniably older, her body showing the gentle wear of time. Her hands had developed the first age spots. Her joints ached after gardening. She tired more easily. They talked about turning more seriously now. "Are you ready?" Sebastian asked one night, watching her rub her sore knees. "Not yet. I want a few more years of sunlight, of tasting food, of being warm. I'll wait as long as you need. Forever, if that's what you want. Not forever, but not quite yet." At 45, Isla was ready. The aches had become chronic. She'd slowed down noticeably, needing naps in the afternoon, unable to keep up with Sebastian's endless energy. She'd lived a full human life, longer than many women in 1456, and infinitely richer than the one she'd been heading toward. She'd learned 6 languages, read thousands of books, mastered sword fighting and chess and philosophy. She'd been loved completely, valued utterly, seen fully. She'd had everything she wanted from human life. "I'm ready," she told Sebastian one night, looking out at the sea. "Turn me." "Are you certain? There's no going back." "I've never been more certain of anything. I choose eternity with you." Sebastian's hands trembled as he cupped her face. "I love you. I will love you forever. Human or vampire, mortal or immortal, you are my heart." "Then make me yours forever. Turn me." The turning happened in their bedchamber, moonlight streaming through windows overlooking the sea. Sebastian had prepared everything: thick curtains to block eventual sunlight, stores of blood he'd carefully collected from animals over weeks, knowing she'd wake ravenous. He'd researched the process obsessively, reading every text in his library about turnings, about how to do it safely, how to minimize pain. But there was no making it gentle. This was death and rebirth, and both hurt. Isla lay in their bed, dressed in simple white linen, her heart beating steady and strong. Sebastian knelt beside her, fighting every instinct that screamed this was wrong. He was killing her. He couldn't do this. But she'd chosen it. She'd demanded it, and he trusted her choices. "Are you ready?" His voice shook. "I'm ready. I love you, Sebastian. In this life and the next. I love you. In all lives, in all forms. Forever." He bent to her throat, fangs extending, and for the first time in 200 years, allowed himself to drink from a human he loved. Her blood was sweet, intoxicating, everything he'd denied himself for centuries, and the monster in him roared with triumph. But he controlled it, remembered this was Isla, his love, his choice, his forever. He drank carefully, deeply, draining her to the very edge of death, but no further. Her heartbeat slowed, weakened, stuttered. When it was barely a whisper, he bit his own wrist and pressed it to her lips. "Drink," he commanded, supernatural compulsion in his voice. Drink and live. Isla's lips parted. She drank his ancient blood, the blood that carried 250 years of existence, of power, of supernatural strength. It burned through her dying veins like fire, like lightning, rewriting her humanity into something other. Her heart stopped. Sebastian held her cooling body, keeping vigil, terrified. What if it didn't work? What if she simply died? What if she woke as a monster with no memory of who she'd been? For 3 days he kept vigil, 3 days of terror, 3 days of praying to a god he wasn't sure listened to creatures like him. On the 3rd night, as the sun set, Isla's eyes opened. They were crimson. She gasped, her first breath in 3 days unnecessary but instinctive, and the world exploded into overwhelming sensation. She could hear everything, Sebastian's still heart, the waves against the shore miles away, birds settling in nests, the blood moving through living things all across the island. She could smell everything, the salt of the sea, the bloom of night flowers, the richness of earth, and underneath it all the intoxicating scent of blood. She could see everything, the texture of stone walls in perfect darkness, dust motes floating in air, the individual threads in the curtains. And the hunger. Oh God, the hunger. It was like starving and burning simultaneously, a need so profound it was agony. She needed blood, needed it like drowning needed air, needed it with every fiber of her transformed being. Sebastian? Her voice came out strange, layered with supernatural resonance. I'm here. He was beside her immediately, his hand cool against her face. How do you feel? Like I'm dying, like I'm starving, like I want to drink everything alive on this island. She looked at him, at the old blood moving through his undead veins, and her fangs extended involuntarily. I want to drink you. That's normal. The hunger is always worst at first, but I'll teach you control. We'll face it together. He showed her his throat. If you need to feed from me, you can. I trust you. Isla forced herself to look away, the effort monumental. No, I remember choosing this. I remember why. I won't let the monster win immediately. You're not a monster, says the vampire to the newborn vampire. It was almost a joke, her old humor surviving transformation. Exactly. I'm an expert on monsters, and you're not one. You're Isla. My Isla. You've just become something more. She focused past the hunger, looking at him clearly for the first time with supernatural senses. She could see everything, the careful control he maintained every moment, the way he held himself still to appear more human, the love in his eyes that had been there all along, but now shone like sunlight. I remember, she said softly. I remember everything. I remember choosing you. I remember 20 years of loving you. I remember wanting this. You don't regret it? Ask me again when the hunger fades. Right now I'm too busy trying not to bite you to have complex emotions about my choices. Sebastian laughed, the sound full of relief. Come, let me teach you to feed properly. There are goats, and I've stored blood for you. We'll get you through this first night. Then I'll teach you everything else. Isla took his offered hand, marveling at her supernatural strength, at the way she could hear his dead heart and her own not beating, at the strange beauty of eternal darkness. Welcome to eternity, Sebastian said softly. Welcome to forever, my love. The first century was hardest. Learning control took decades. Learning to feed without killing. Learning to stop before draining a creature completely. Learning to resist the maddening call of human blood when ships occasionally passed near the island, now that Sebastian had permanently released his compulsion. Isla struggled where Sebastian had already learned, and sometimes she failed, killing goats she'd meant to merely feed from, her control not yet refined enough to stop in time. But she never gave up. She fought for control as viciously as he had, determined to be the woman who'd chosen this life rather than the monster the hunger wanted her to become. Sebastian taught her everything: how to compel when necessary, how to move with supernatural speed, how to fight with enhanced strength, how to survive in a world that would kill her if she made mistakes. They established ethical feeding arrangements with passing ships over the decades, careful compulsion and generous payment in ancient gold, taking small amounts from willing sailors who'd forget the encounter, no one harmed. They built a life in darkness, sleeping through days and living through nights, reading and talking and loving under moon and stars. The island transformed from prison to paradise, their shared sanctuary from a world that wouldn't understand. By their 50th year together, Isla had achieved the control Sebastian had taken a century to learn. By their 100th year, she could walk through human settlements without triggering bloodlust, could converse with mortals without compulsion leaking through, could be trusted completely. They were partners in eternity, neither master nor servant, just two immortal beings who'd chosen each other and kept choosing each other through decades of nights. The castle became beautiful, restored Byzantine architecture, gardens that bloomed eternally under Isla's supernatural care, a library that rivaled universities, a home that whispered of permanence and love. 100 years after Isla's turning, they sat together on the ramparts as the last light faded from the sky. That brief twilight moment after the sun had set below the horizon, but before full darkness fell. Safe from the lethal rays, but able to enjoy the lingering colors painted across the clouds. "Do you ever regret it?" Sebastian asked, the question he'd asked 100 times in 100 years. "Never," Isla answered, the answer she'd given every time. "Not once. This island was your prison. We made it our paradise. I was alone for 200 years. Then you washed up on my shore and changed everything. You saved me, not just from the shipwreck, from a life where I wasn't truly valued, wasn't truly seen. You saw me, Sebastian. You still see me. You saved me too, from an eternity of isolation and self-hatred. You taught me I could be more than my worst moment, that 200 people dead doesn't erase the possibility of being good going forward." "We saved each other," Isla said, taking his hand, their cool fingers intertwining. As darkness fell completely, they retreated into their castle, their home, their shared forever. Outside, the Mediterranean continued its eternal rhythm, waves against stone, wind through ruins, the same sea that had brought them together a century before. The island appeared on some maps now, marked as inhabited by reclusive scholars who paid well for supplies and privacy, occasionally visited by traders who never stayed long and always left with gold and foggy memories of pleasant transactions. But inside the castle walls, there was no pretense. There was love that had survived decades, companionship that had deepened into something unbreakable. Two immortal beings who'd found in each other what they'd been missing. Someone who understood, someone who stayed, someone who chose them every single day of forever. Isla curled against Sebastian in their bedchamber, her head on his chest where a heart no longer beat, his arms wrapped around her like the most precious treasure. "I love you," she whispered, "for eternity." "I love you," he answered, "for always." And somewhere in the darkness, the island kept its secrets. The vampire lord who'd exiled himself from guilt, the shipwrecked lady who'd washed ashore by chance, the two lonely souls who'd found each other and built paradise from punishment. The Mediterranean didn't care about their story. The sea had seen countless loves born and die across centuries. But this love, vampire and mortal turned eternal, would outlast the sea itself, enduring through darkness and blood and immortality, forever choosing each other in their island sanctuary where exile had transformed into home.